A very good evening and welcome to this edition of the Fourth Estate. Charles Mwangu Shampagi. The media in Uganda under attack as the regulator, Uganda Communications Commission, issues instructions to media houses to suspend some of the media workers. This coming at a time when the World Press was marking World Press Freedom Day. We'll discuss that. I need to warn our viewers right from the onset that we did extend an invitation to the Uganda Communications Commission, but they haven't been able to honor it. Reasons for that, I am not aware as of the moment, but we'll continue and have the discussion with the panelists that I have in studio. And this is close to us because we are the people behind here that are supposed to are affected by the actions or inactions of the Uganda Communications Commission. We'll also be discussing a new opinion poll, particularly the questions on politics and the journey towards 2021. Some of the results have been published in the Sunday Monitor. You've seen a bit of it in the East African, but the full opinion poll will be released tomorrow at Hotel Africana. We'll be getting some details of that opinion poll and interpreting what it means as of the moment on the basis of what we know as of now. Let me introduce the team that I have tonight. Starting at the extreme end, Robert Sempala, Executive Director at the Human Rights Network for Journalists. You're most welcome.
Thank you, Charles.
We have Dr. Patrick Wakida. He's Executive Director at Research World International and is the man behind the latest opinion poll. Actually been running the other opinion polls apart from the Afrobarometer one. You've been running all the local polls. Very nice to have you, Dr. Wakida.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you.
And from Uganda Christian University Mukono, we have Dr. Emily Marachto. Emily Comfort Marachto. Very nice to have you.
Thank you, Charles.
I want to start with it's not very fair to have the discussion without UCC explaining what it means by its letters to media houses, but we can discuss the implications of these kinds of communications. The latest one is affecting about 37 media practitioners, but my information is UCC has been doing these kinds of things for a long time, threatening and intimidating media houses, which it is supposed to be regulating, or which it regulates, and quoting the Communications Act. Let me start with you, Robert Sempala. What do we know at the moment about the actions that communication from the Uganda Communications Commission about a failure to adhere to minimum broadcasting standards?
Thank you, Charles. To begin with, it's extremely difficult for us to know what is entailed in the minimum broadcasting standards because it remains a preserve of the UCC to determine what is minimum. But you would really...
That's section 41 subsection A of the Act.
Of the Act talks about the minimum broadcasting standards. It does not even talk about things that now UCC is looking at. So you even want to run around to find where they can fit into what UCC purports to be now controlling. And that's the main problem with the latest directives to media houses. Because we know certainly that it stems from them covering doing live coverage of politicians, especially in the opposition, and this does not seem to go well with the UCC. So what we have is that many media houses, as we speak, are at crossroads, not sure of what to do with these directives, whether to lay off their staff because the directive was to take immediate effect, and then warned of repercussions in case they are not adhering to them.
And what are these repercussions from what you know?
Taking away your license. That's the ultimate price you pay, and that is actually what UCC has always been scaring media houses with, closing you down. But what we also know that UCC is using powers that are not within the Act, that are not theirs. Things to do with looking into content, the length of stories, the discipline, and so much squarely lie with the Media Council when you read the Press and Journalists Act. So when we see UCC usurping this power, we really need to bring it to order and say, look, you are borrowing powers that are not yours and you're overstepping them as well. So what we're encouraging media houses to do is not to adhere to these directives, challenge them in courts of law, and also want to place UCC where it falls by questioning its mandate, its powers, to directly interfere with the editorial content and policies of media houses and independent media houses.
On Friday, during events to commemorate World Press Freedom Day, Dr. Maratho, representatives of the Uganda communications were there, and you, as a teacher as a teacher for journalists, part of the content you cover is media law.
Yeah.
I want to imagine. Is it true that the Uganda Communications Commission, number one, is overstepping its mandate? Do you think so?
Actually, you're right. We teach media law and policy, and I do teach media law for both postgraduate and undergraduate courses. And fortunately, the UCC Act, both 97 and the new one, 2013, were subjects of my research a few years ago. And in many ways, you would not say that they're exactly overstepping their mandate, because the law cross-references the Press and Journalists Act 1995. And by cross-referencing, it means that it can actually do some things that are in the Press and Journalists Act. Now, we have to remember that the UCC Act 2013 was a merger of the Electronic Media Act 96 and the UCC Act 1997. Now, its objective was very good, because it wanted to, the main objective was to modernize communication systems and ensure that new challenges in media were taken care of. And remember, in the space of convergence, you're actually looking at how does telecommunication relate with broadcast in particular. And so its intention was good. But what I found in my research also is that there are so many laws, and you have to look not just at UCC Act for whatever actions that UCC will take, because there are many other, you have to look beyond the core media laws to see whether UCC is overstepping its mandate or not. In its current directive, it is obviously overstepping its mandate, because there's no requirement. When you look at the functions in the law, the functions of UCC in the 2013 Act, it does not include anywhere the discipline of journalists and any demand on media houses to actually discipline their journalists. That function rests with Media Council alone, because it's the Media Council that the Press and Journalists Act authorizes. And by complaint, by the way, someone has to complain to Media Council and say, we have watched Charles' show and it does not meet the minimum broadcasting standards.
So who defines the minimum broadcasting standards? Are they defined in the Press and Journalists Act?
Yes, they are, because there's I think it's the second schedule in Press and Journalists Act that defines that is almost the code, the ethical code of the law. So because they are within the law, it does define issues to do with privacy, issues to do, the usual ethical code issues. But the current use of it by UCC is what is problematic. And I will tell you many other things that exist that, I'm not saying the media does not make mistakes. Actually, it does make mistakes a lot, but they don't call the media to order when those mistakes do not touch on powers that be. So you can take, for example, where individuals have been affected, UCC will not bother, but it will bother if they feel that this content is political in some way, if the content is tied to the politics of that day. That is when they get concerned. Ideally, they should be more concerned about infrastructure of broadcasting. They should be more concerned about who gets a license, to ensure that everybody is operating within the law by having a license that is valid, and so on and so forth. So as long as there is a desire to protect certain areas of content, the law can be applied in any way. Because there's always that little thing within any law And you can look at beyond even middle, at the Public Order Management Act, for example, the way that it has been interpreted, the way that it has been applied to control freedom of expression, all of that is part of the misgivings within the law that are present at the moment. So it's not just that the law itself is so widely bad. No, it takes care of things with those little provisions that are ambiguous in the law, because who defines minimum standards anyway, and what is it? What is it that we can, even if you looked at the second schedule in the Press and Journalists Act, because now the Electronic Media Act was completely repealed, you cannot even refer to it, because now we are using the UCC Act 2013. So if you look at the second schedule, there are really ethical issues that media houses can take care of. It does not require UCC to come and order anyone to suspend their journalists. And we would also want to know, where is the complaint? Who is complaining? Because even by, if any wrong was done, there are formal processes that are defined, clearly defined in the Press and Journalists Act, by which that can be addressed.
I want to bring in Dr. Wakida here. I've been wondering, the UCC, or any other authority for that matter, might apply or misapply a legal instrument or a statutory provision, well knowing that the intention is not to achieve the directive they have given, but rather, because they know if they were challenged in court, they would possibly be found at fault.
Yeah.
So what do they hope to achieve?
You see, one of the biggest challenge this country is facing is the death of institutions. You are having sub-institutions that are having more powers than the set institutions of this country.
But you can't have any powers if you're dead.
When I
so UCC, that's a strain of...
You see, when I heard and I read my friend Mtavazi's letter, I sympathized with him. The profession wouldn't do that. Well aware that he was wrong. Let me tell you this. The powers to recruit a staff of an organization lies with that organization. The contract is not with UCC. That's a fact. 2, the determination of firing that staff still lies with what UCC would have done would have been to complain. To complain to NBS, for example, and say, we've noticed that a particular staff is overriding, but not to direct.
How does UCC, as a regulator of communications, realize that a certain Robert Sempala, employed by NTV or Spark TV or whichever media house, is not operating within minimum broadcasting standards?
No,
because my question is, the section of the law quoted, section 41, I think, subsection A, talks about minimum broadcasting standards. Whether those touch on the ethics and the conduct and the professionalism of the particular broadcaster or the media house is not clear, in my view. I've been trying to get an interpretation, and I can't find it yet.
Charles,
yes,
I've spent time listening to all those who have come on these radios and TVs, trying to give an explanation of why UCC behaved the way they did. But I can tell you that I have not picked anything. To the extent that they wanted to know the qualifications of the staff that are employed by a media house. When one person, I think it was Bossa, somebody made a statement and said there is somebody who complained. But he also made a statement and he said, you see, those images they show portray this country in a bad light. Little did they know that actually UCC by all intent and purposes, is portraying this country in a very bad light. And I said this before. He said, if I was Mr. Museveni, I would start to look at UCC as a liability to me as a president. I would start to look at the behavior of our police as a liability to me because they are causing people to discuss. And remember, when they discuss this, they don't discuss the police. They discuss the state.
Yep.
Unfortunately, I was watching Citizen TV, and the whole discussion was about Uganda. And this guy said, I don't want to be like this neighbor who sees a man who keeps beating his wife every day, and he says nothing. And he talked about this country.
Yes.
And I said, was that what Mr. Mtavazi attempting to achieve? You see, professionalism helps us to keep within our space. Once you lose that element, then you become irrelevant. And I don't want to say Mr. Mtavazi and UCC is becoming irrelevant, but I can tell you the reason why they are not here is because they can't defend
the actions.
The action they took.
But I can tell you, because this affects what I do. So I need to declare that bias to our viewers. I know for a fact that what we saw the other day is just the tip of the iceberg. That the regulator, Uganda Communications Commission, has been sending out these kinds of communications, has been calling media houses, and until it's exploded because it has included a larger pool of media practitioners and media houses, we are debating it. But Robert Sempala there will tell you that many colleagues, many radio stations, it's a phone call from an official at the Uganda Communications Commission to a manager, to a proprietor, to say, you don't take action, we'll switch you off. Dr. Marachi, let me come back to you before I go back to Sempala. The UCC Act 2013 gives licensing powers to UCC, to media houses, for media houses, which are annual.
Yeah.
And my own understanding now is that the UCC is using that annual licensing to keep media houses on tenterhooks. Was this an oversight in the passage of the law? You did research on it. Was this an oversight? Is that a healthy way to regulate media houses by when the proprietor, the managers know it's May, the license is running out in the next 2-3 months, and the UCC is sending you a letter and telling you better behave. So was that an oversight?
First of all, I don't think it was an oversight. I have followed events in this country long enough to know that nothing is really an oversight. A lot of things are very deliberate when we know what exactly we want out of it. The purpose was precisely that, to ensure that you can have some carrot you can withdraw at your convenience.
You keep them on a short leash.
Exactly, so that you know that people will be intimidated by the fact that if we don't comply with ABCD, these informal demands and so on, our license could be at risk. So I don't think it was deliberate, but also not enough was done to think through the UCC Act 2013. They almost just lifted the provisions of the 1997 Act. I think the intention was really to just merge the two bodies, and those who were in the Broadcasting Council were probably more interested in the monies the telecos were making, and so that they make more money and so on. Because I'll tell you, the issue of qualification of staff, now, that's a classic example of what is in the law that has rarely been called to apply, because it exists in the 1995 Press and Journalists Act that a journalist must have a certain profession. A journalist must be somebody of these qualifications. It's there. But we have seen many radio stations owned by politicians, by whoever, who are practicing without any qualification of that caliber, of that kind, and they are never called to order. Why? Because it doesn't matter. It only matters if you step on the toes of people they don't want you to step on, because the issue of qualification has not come up until recently. So by the time you are using, the things exist in law so that they can be called whenever they are needed, so that they can be applied whenever they are needed. There are many provisions like that one of qualification that are not being used. But there are many things also that are illegal that the current UCC actors are doing. There is no way. Actually, you may know that the international protocols on press freedom actually require independence, or editorial independence. They require that there is diversity. They require that there is freedom of editorial freedom. And so it does not come anywhere. And we are signatories to all of those. It does not come anywhere that somebody from UCC should even call any media manager over the conduct of a journalist, because there are laid down procedures of discipline, both from within the media house and by the Media Council. And by the way, the Media Council was crippled because they have not given it money to function. And therefore, the body that is rightfully mandated to ensure that there is professionalism of journalists, and you may know that's why even the independent...
Yes, there's also been debate about whether we need to have a government-mandated media council or an industry-generated one where there is there's a peer checks.
That's where I was coming to. You know that Haruna and company came up with an independent media council, which also didn't work. But anyway, there are difficulties around. Back to your question, was it an oversight? I don't think so. There are, if you study the content of the various laws, there is always something left. There's a fluidity of laws in this country that they can be applied in some way beyond what the intention of the original law is supposed to be. And the discretion, the application, the interpretation is left to the person who is going to use it. So UCC can claim that because the Press and Journalists Act 95, which they cross-reference, which UCC Act 2013 cross-references, actually talks about qualification of staff. So it would be within their mandate to find out who are these people who are making mistakes. Maybe they are making mistakes because they're actually not qualified ABCD.
But what is the risk, Robert, that next you might see the UCC sending a list of who should work, who should be employed? I don't know if it will be published.
Yeah, but before Robert comes in, actually that is not the mandate of UCC to even ask, because it is the Media Council mandated to act on that particular aspect. So UCC does not have, in fact, on Friday, one of the questions we ended up with as we had that dialogue was, does UCC really understand its mandate, its powers, you know, the parameters of its powers and how to interpret it? Probably they don't. And the mistake, if the intention, if the intention was for UCC to actually oversee journalists and media houses, there would have been a deliberate attempt in the law to ensure that there are journalists sitting on that council, or that there are people who are professionally competent to determine what is even minimum broadcasting standards. But it is not there in the law. But the 1995 Press and Journalists Act deliberately establishes who should sit on the council, and there are journalists, there are professionals who will know whether Charles is doing what is outside of ethical journalism or not. But at the moment, the way UCC is constituted, one can even argue that they do not have the competence to do that.
Robert, I wanted to change my question a little to you, because I thought we would discuss this behemoth, because UCC is potentially the biggest institution of government in a regulatory capacity today, in terms of the resources available to it and in terms of its overreach. But as journalism practitioners and media practitioners, how do we go out of this?
I think one is what the two colleagues have been talking about, to really go and understand the true mandate of UCC and bring it to the attention of UCC itself, by way of helping it to interpolate what its mandate is. We surely today know that UCC is falling short of appreciating its role, and accordingly just running anyhow.
But it has a huge stick called the license.
The license,
Yes.
which is even misusing. You talked of licenses to media houses. You go and look around. How many media houses have substantive licenses? Most of them have provisional licenses.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is supposed to keep you at bay. Yeah, such when you misbehave, it is easier to take away this one, and you have nowhere to run to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's pick this discussion up after a very short commercial break. We'll be right back. The Sunday Vision has for me a classic cartoon of a newspaper vendor who is giving a blank newspaper to a buyer. And the buyer asks, what is this? You're giving me a blank newspaper. And says, this is what will not annoy the authorities. So it's the media is walking on eggshells. But Dr. Akida, you're coming from a situation where, in this country, we've seen closures of media houses. The longest was of CBS in 2009. It wasn't opened until towards the 2011 elections. From September, I think about September 12th, 2009, until very close to the 2011 elections, CBS was closed, was shut down. And there were games about renewal of its license. Around that time, as Dr. Maratsa said, you're working on a UCC Act, which gets enacted in 2013. And this UCC Act radically shifts the licensing regime for media houses, whereby you're giving an annual license. So, and like Robert said, most of the licenses out there are provisional licenses.
Yeah.
Meaning that no manager of a media house in this country can go to sleep and know this media
I'll
house,
get the license.
yes, I can run freely, question the authorities that I'm supposed to question, and know that I will continue to run business. Because you're running not just, you're running a business. And you sustain it, shareholders will be asking questions. In those circumstances, how do you navigate? How do these businesses, media houses that run the business, businesses that run, how do I put it? Enterprises that run the business of media navigate? Thank you, the producers put that cartoon. It's a beautiful cartoon, one of the most beautiful cartoons I have seen.
Yes.
Yes, please go ahead.
You know, Charles,
Yes.
like I said in the beginning, normally the law don't look at its application. You're a lawyer, you look at the spirit of that act. Under what circumstance was that act enacted? We are here discussing the Media Act. But you know, it's the same questions that the country has about many of these other laws, like POMA, for example.
POMA is the Public Order Management
They
Act,
are
2009.
really not intended to regulate. They are intended to control. And in the circumstance of where you have to control, sometimes you have to overstep the mandate given to you in order for. And I think that's what you're saying. Notwithstanding the fact that media must maintain its responsibility, the responsible reporting. Because, you know,
How do you do that? And I want to throw this to the table. How do you do that? Because on the streets, members of the security forces have consistently and repeatedly been battering journalists.
and I think
And,
that's
and the readers and the viewers of shows like this and the listeners to shows have been questioning. There's no question that gets me as irritated as a question of, the media has lost it. When they're not looking at it. Yes.
I was still making a comment on this. News collection, news is either bad news or good news. an attempt by you to only give news, then you're censoring the news. And I think what the state is trying to do through UCC is to censor what people can see and what the media can give to the public. Now, once you start to do that, then you leave out the major news, which is about 70% of the news, which is normally the other part. Because you are supposed to be the voice of the public. The voice. Forget about the information you give. But that you are supposed to bring out things that community feels should be brought out. Now, if you are going to be restricted, like you said, on the street, the cameras are being, taken away.
They're being broken.
That is a sign that there is something wrong. It's a sign that the country must reflect on.
Let me just stay with you for a minute. Isn't that, pardon my French, foolhardy in this era of very fast changing, very fast advancing technological advancements? Because people no longer have to rely. I can tell you that the UCC has been struggling, really struggling to control social media. If you see what I have been able to see, correspondences between our regulator here and social media, global social media giants like Facebook. You need to read that case, the search for the character called TVO, and what kinds of communications were coming from Uganda to Facebook Africa division, to Facebook, wherever it is headquartered. They're struggling with how to control, because we had an experience in 2016. Social media platforms were shut down. WhatsApp, and people managed to navigate around that and get to VPN. Then you arrive at a situation where the government decides to introduce a tax, carefully crafted to say, we are looking for extra resources because there's a lot of money being transacted, there's a lot of communication, and the president said people are spending a lot of time doing useless communication, so you want to regulate that. It hasn't stopped anything. So if you're not investing as a country in those appropriate, in trying to catch up with global technological developments and innovation in the space of communication and exchange of information, what are you doing running after?
You see, Chelsea, you are assuming that these guys actually want progress. And I don't want you to assume that.
No, I'm not assuming
this kind of behavior.
But my question, Doctor, is in which century do you live when young people are seated in garages in London, in Ireland, in California, all over the world, including here, thinking of ways of how to communicate? And you're here running after, don't show a live image. But you're putting 1,600, you have a target of putting 3,000 plus CCTV cameras. Who is accessing that information? How do you tell me that because a journalist from here has gone with a camera, is capturing an image? Some of the worst images, if you notice, the image that of someone being battered, being kidnapped at the street near Christ King Church a few years ago, I think last year. Yes, was done by Salt TV, but that footage came from a bystander. If you notice over the last few days, on WhatsApp groups, the image of this woman who was stripped when Kizza Besigye was going to massacre, they literally pulled off her clothes and saying, why are you undressing me? And then she goes on top of the police pickup and decides to actually undress, has been recirculating via social media. So where do you create your allies? Do you create your allies by trying to intimidate the professionals, or trying to find a way how to mitigate the damage that can be done by the people outside?
Your system is going to reach when you don't have anything good to report.
And?
and you'll be reporting majority fatalities. You'll be reporting things of that nature, potholes in the road, for example. And that will be bad in the image of the country. You'll be reporting the behavior of the police, and that is going to be taken as bad. Unfortunately, when a regime reaches that point, I have been reading about riots. When a regime reaches to feel that its own population can riot, everything becomes suspect.
Okay, Dr. Marshall, I'll come to you in a moment. Let me just go back to Robert for 1 minute. Robert, how much space can the media cede? And I want you to also speak to that.
How much space
can the media cede to regulation and control?
I really want a well-regulated media in order for it to grow professionally. I do not believe in control. We really want a minimum level of who can practice in this profession. And that's why I really want us to have NEJU put back in place. I really want us to have well-structured processes of how one becomes a journalist and practices. You know, it is a fundamental right for people to express themselves, which is okay. But then when you really come into to practice it as a profession, we need minimum standards in that regard. And the law is very clear about that. It's only government that is failing these structures to be put in place. So I do not want to see a media that is a walk in and out profession. Even people that do not really know what journalism is, cannot really explain it, cannot do a good story, will carry the recording gadgets and hold out as journalists. I do not want us to be like that forever. But I think what is happening now and what we are against is trying to really get into the editorial content of media houses. Yeah, to say do not have Charles speak anything. Even before they speak, somebody is already very scared. Yeah, and that is very detrimental to press freedom, not only for you, for us as media practitioners, but for the wider public.
Okay.
What the media is doing today is edutainment. They are doing a lot of education, they're doing a lot of entertainment, and less of information. Yeah. And the regulators seem to see that as now business as usual. To us, it's less of what the media is supposed to do. But the media's cardinal role is watchdog role. If you do not see the media doing this, holding the powerful people to account, holding them to scrutiny, you know certainly that something is extremely wrong somewhere.
Okay. I'll put the same question to you, Dr. Marato. From what I know, I've been in the media for quite a number of years, so I know what goes on behind the scenes. I can tell you and our viewers that the media has ceded a lot of ground to control of the Ugandan government authorities. The only thing is the government has been acting like the elephant. It says, please just allow me to put in my trunk in a hut because it's raining. They end up taking over everything. Yes. So there is no minimum concessions. There are no minimum concessions that the media can give, because every time they have given they have lowered the bar a little, the space has been occupied and they have stayed there. Now, is that, number one, healthy? Is it sustainable? Who does it benefit?
Okay, how much space can the media cede? And it has ceded so much space already. I think we have been not very analytical, because there were systematic things happening in the various laws that were being enacted that slowly by slowly were demanding space from the media. And I think my research covered a 20-year period, and you know, by the end of my research there were about 18 laws alone that were trying to regulate the media. And a lot of this, and I think he talked about, Dr. Wakida talked about the spirit of the laws, and that's what we have. If you look at each of these problematic laws that require reform, they have come after either elections, they have come within specific periods, and that means that we cannot even begin to speak of freedom of the press being under attack without speaking of the wider freedom of expression, including freedom of assembly, including other, rights and responsibilities. So the bigger question is actually not how much space can the media sit, but the larger question is, do Ugandans even have democratic rights now that we can speak of meaningfully? Because freedom of the press is not enjoyed in isolation of freedom of expression, of the wider freedoms that we are talking about. So there are going to always be questions around the media. And you know this, you've been in the media. There is, one of my articles actually talks about co-optation of media. That there has been a lot of that happening already. A lot of media houses know where the bite is, and there are certain things, there are no rules around them, but there are certain things that they will not go to, because there is this unwritten thing about this subject, you cannot talk about it. Your journalists know it, and they will not go there. So there is, I think, going to be even worse. If what we are seeing now is anything to go by, I think that the space is even going to shrink further. And that space is not just a media space, it is a democratic space. And that is something we have to deal with.
The theme of this year's World Press Freedom Day was on media and elections.
Yes.
We're going into an election in 2021. Dr. Wakida, you're producing, you launch your opinion poll tomorrow. I know that the opinion poll is much, much larger than the political questions you have asked. But the exciting discussion will not be on how well we are sleeping or how happy we are. It will be on the political temperature. What everybody will be discussing more exhaustively is the political temperature. I have gleaned a little bit on some of your findings, but let me bring it to you. So on the political question, the monitors, the Sunday Monitor, ran that interesting story on with the three faces: President Yoweri Museveni, Dr. Kizza Besigye, and Robert Sentamu Kyagulanyi, Bobi Wine. The headline said Museveni goes below 50%, and I've seen people debating that extensively. So what surprises are coming out of that opinion poll?
Let me first say this, that the poll that you see represents the month of April. Opinion polls represents the period of data collection, because that was the period for which there was an interaction between the voter outside there and the interviewer. We did go around the country, randomly selected about 60 districts.
60 districts?
60 districts, yes, across the country, and you'll see the map tomorrow. We did have a sample. A sample is a percentage of a population which is representative in scientific terms. We did 2,042. Our target was really 2,000. But there are areas where we did
a bit more.
Yeah, we normally call the booster samples for certain reasons. There are many questions. Monitor published one question, but I can tell you there are about 60 questions that were answered. We were able to establish, for example, how many Ugandans, in percentage terms, already have a national ID. Which particular area of the country doesn't have a national ID. We're able to provide information on how many Ugandans actually voted. Remember, this is the first poll since the elections. So we're able to ask people, did you participate in the previous elections? And the answer was as simple, yes, no. We're able to ask people their feeling about the economy. Are they feeling the economy is improving in general? Are they feeling better at their household level? We're able to ask these questions. We're able to ask questions, their level of trust of the institutions that serve them. And you'd be seeing those results tomorrow. But we're also able to ask some very difficult questions regarding the choices. And like I said, those decisions were for that period when data was being collected. We asked the question, if elections were held today, and you're going in that box, which person would you vote for? We asked the question. You have a member of parliament, do you know them? Say yes. Would you return your member of parliament today if you were to go in the box? And if you couldn't, can you tell us why? All these confirm to what is going to be presented tomorrow at Africana.
Dr. Okida.
Yes.
Yeah, I know you've done many of these polls.
Yes.
The character of Ugandans, the discussion we're having in the first part of this show, of a people, if the media can't express itself without looking over its shoulder, how the regulator UCC is going to behave. Dr. Maracho here talked about it being larger, broader, to include general freedoms of expression.
Yeah.
How reliable are the answers that you got in this opinion poll?
You see, I can tell you that having done polls in this country for a long time, there is a behavior shift in the population on the way they respond on the different questions. There is that shift. People increasingly are becoming bolder, and you will see that in our poll, that people are able to give you their responses. Even those, we've devised mechanism to get the views of those who say no comment. We'll put other questions which are not direct that we'll use to determine the behaviors. 1 or 2, 3 questions.
What is the risk with that strategy, with that research method or polling method, to put your own views? And someone asked me, I shared this with you earlier because I did make some mention in a story I did for the East African about your opinion poll, and particularly the numbers that the poll turns out for Mr. Chagulanyi, putting him number 2 after Yoweri Museveni, and then Kizza Besigye number 3. What is the risk that you're not being carried away by your own excitement about what's going on?
You see, Charles, these things for any student of social science will tell you that there are 2 methodological approaches to research. Whereas you can be subjective on a qualitative research, it becomes difficult for you to be subjective on a quantitative research.
We have experience.
Because for us, and I've said this, if you have queries around the research, ask.
But Dr. Okida, just a moment. We're coming from, you're doing this first opinion poll since the 2016 elections. In between, we've seen opinion polls that went flat wrong in the United States over the Donald Trump election, flat wrong in the United Kingdom.
Yes.
How different is your own research?
You see, I said this, I think I give this explanation. The problem with our colleagues in the United Kingdom is that they do research on telephone. The difference between that research and the research that we do here is that we face you.
Yes, but also the difference is...
And most times research in Europe is based on one question. When you ask somebody one question, you don't have a question that you can cross-tabulate with it.
Yes, but also the difference is, Doctor, that you're dealing with populations that are freer to express themselves, that have a longer history of opinion polling and research, and therefore are not expected to suspect and say, where are these guys coming from? What do I tell them that sounds... Okay, Dr. Maracho, you're an academic. Please help us out here. You've been doing research.
I think I want first to clarify.
Yes.
It is true there is fear in the population. We measure that and you will find the level of confidence that covers that fear. I have done.
Is that captured? For example, the question of
I have conducted a number of surveys in this country, and in all surveys I've conducted, I've been within the margin of error.
What is your margin of error for this one?
It's 5%.
5%, plus or minus?
Plus, yes.
Plus or minus.
And
isn't that a huge margin of error?
No, it isn't. It isn't. You see, this is a social research. If I was dealing with a scientific research, then I would say that is because people can be different.
I think you've laid out the broad sides. Dr. Maratho and Robert, hold your views for now. Yeah. Let's take a commercial break, and when we come back, so that you can have enough time to interpret and interrogate the opinion poll. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This last segment of the Fourth Estate, and now we're discussing the opinion poll that shows President Museveni's support has dramatically dropped below the 50% mark. I think he's posting a 32% if elections were held tomorrow. That's what the question is. If elections are held tomorrow, who do you support? And Robert Senta Muchagulanyi, Bobby Wine coming in at 22%, and Dr. Kizabeche coming in at 13%. People have looked at those numbers and they're saying, really? Wait a minute. Dr. Maratho.
Thank you. So what about the numbers? You really, like, they don't believe it?
Yeah, I say.
Yes, you see, I am, first of all, well, I'm an educator, but I'm a researcher first and foremost. Yes. So I would understand the research environment we are talking about. And I hear your sentiment about, people who already fear to speak about certain things. But increasingly also, I think a lot of Ugandans, when you assure them of confidentiality, speak out. A lot of Ugandans, when they know that this thing will not be traced to them as individuals, will actually speak up, including people in government. A lot of my research focuses on people in the policy space in government, so I speak to a lot of people. So I would not have a problem with that. I cannot authoritatively talk about the methodology because I haven't read the methods they have used, but I would think that that should be a representative enough sample to see.
I've been told that 2,000 is a decent number.
Yeah, it is.
Especially given a population of 40,000. Yeah. You have Americans, Gallup, doing these polls on a population of 1,200 and in a population of 300 million people.
So it's a decent number, and it should be able to tell us something. But in terms of its outcome, I think that it shouldn't be surprising, actually. I don't know if you find that surprising. I don't, for two reasons. Because let's not forget the period of the poll. The period of the poll is April.
Yes.
And a lot has been happening in April. Bobby Wine has been in people's faces in the news for being arrested, for being whatever. There are many things happening that the population is aware of that can easily, I mean, in research we talk about factors that might influence the outcome of your research. And the fact that Bobby Wine has been in the news for all of these reasons could have influenced the outcome of the research. But also, I think for a long time now, people have discontent that we do not want to acknowledge. People are not very enthusiastic about the current government. When you get into normal spaces like the rest of us do, getting into a taxi and all of those things, you in ordinary spaces, you hear how unhappy people are because all of these actions, like the one of UCC, the one of arresting Bobby Wine, all of these are getting people to really think, are we on the right course? There's a lot of negative stuff going around. So if you're talking April, I would not be surprised by that finding at all. I would actually expect it. I would be surprised. And
if the result was different.
If the result was different. And when you think about the space that Dr. Kizza Besigye is occupying, he has not been in people's faces, at least not, at least outside of Kampala, because the news right now.
Well, actually, he hasn't been in Kampala. He was in people's faces in Jinja, in Mubende, not much in Kampala.
Yeah, so maybe Jinja was not one of the areas. But anyway, there are many reasons that could justify the findings from our researchers.
Robert, you as a journalism practitioner now working at HRNJ, what opinion polls and their reporting in the media are always very controversial. Because people accuse you of driving an agenda, people accuse you of colluding, even after Dr. Okida has explained his methodology. They'll accuse the media houses, and some media houses will stay away from an opinion poll, some media houses will cover it. The question is, were you surprised by at least that one question that has been out in the media?
No, not at all. But what I see here are sentiments of people trying to see who can really come so close to the incumbent and possibly have him out of the way. If it were for between Bobby and Kebi, I think the results would have been extremely different, because while many think that Bobby might be a very good guy, they think that he's more tested and is more pushy, he's going to do things differently if it were between the two. But the moment you involve the incumbent, things are certainly to be in his favor.
Or maybe I should put that question to Dr. Okida. Did you ask a question that eliminates some individuals?
You see, this is a very comprehensive survey. We asked people, do you belong to any political party, for example? Are you close?
Yeah.
And the answer was yes. No, I don't belong. We asked those who said we belong to it or we are close to any political party. Ask them, which political party are you close to? We went ahead and asked.
What numbers do you have for that?
Well, I'll give you tomorrow. We even asked them, those who said yes, we belong to. We asked, are you?
We're a few minutes to tomorrow.
Do you have? Do you have?
You can as well give us the
have a membership card?
I mean, for the purpose of this discussion.
Do you have a membership card?
Yes.
For that party where you belong. Again, we have those who said yes. We asked them, how did you get it? So you can see it was a stream of follow-up questions.
Okay.
Now, there is a tendency of people trying to say, if M7 was not there, we have that question which was purely for opposition. And this question was, should the opposition unite to field one presidential candidate? Because that's a discussion within the opposition. And if they united, for those who said yes, if they were to unite, who do you think should be the flag bearer? All those answers are available. We did not leave any question around
Dr. Okida, I'm asking you to mention numbers, either for your first question or this question. You choose one.
Which one?
On if the opposition united, who would they vote for?
No, I want to request that you allow that to be part of the presentation for tomorrow.
You know, I don't want to make a kalango for the for the presentation of the opinion poll.
I
want to.
I would be very comfortable to, you know, like you are managed here. I am managed at Research World International, and I have restrictions on what I can say. As for now, I want to keep that, you know, ethics until tomorrow. What you've gotten in the media is just a very small percentage. I've said these are about.
So this drip ends tomorrow. Tomorrow is
by 9 o'clock
is 25 minutes away.
So we have promised to give
actually 55 minutes away.
Everybody the result. If you can't come to attend the presentation, go on our website, Research World International. You will find a presentation there. We are going to put there.
Tomorrow is 55 minutes away.
Yes. And I want people to know that for us, when we go the field, as a researcher, you are guided by your conscience and professionalism. You are not guided by a feeling. Those feelings are left behind because of what importance.
So is there a dramatic shift on that question of if the opposition united, who they would vote?
There is. I have said this, that for the first time I've done a poll that has surprised me as a researcher. You know, in research we have what's called the hypothesis, written or not written. You go in the field with that hypothetical feeling that I think this is the thing. You reach there and you get totally opposite results. And the results that we have, definitely people are going to talk a lot. A lot, because it is surprising results. This is one of the biggest survey we are doing. 2,000 respondents. Your boss, with a population of 40 million people, you ask them how many people do you use to verify the UBOS data, and they'll tell you 1% or 2%. Now here we are using 2,000 individuals. It's very representative. It was randomly done. We did not predetermine that we are going to Kisoro. No. Until that point of randomization, then we knew the district.
Let me go back to Robert for a moment. Yeah, I said reporting opinion polls can be dicey. Can be.
Yeah.
You're saying that you're not surprised by the results. Why?
Because
The results on one question. Dr. Wakeda has just refused to answer.
yes, I wanted Dr.
questions.
Wakeda to,
Yes.
to let the yes
cut
to,
out of the bag.
yeah, for now,
for now,
because
I'll
like you said, a few minutes just to tomorrow, I think it will be extremely important to listen to what that brought out, but also about this unreported in the media. We have seen media houses being victimized because of such polls. You know, somebody who had to leave a media house and now do politics because of a poll like this that put someone, and it was sneaked reportedly into the paper. Yeah, and now here, since we see the president trailing almost at his lowest at 32, you're going to see now a new poll that will, you know, like push the incumbent as flying with 50 plus to really wash away what Dr. Wakeda has ushered onto
50
the,
plus
to the
or
scene.
80%?
No, it doesn't go to 80 anymore.
I've had talk about 75% going back to those numbers of 2000. Was that 1996?
Yes.
Yes.
And normally what was always reflected towards the close, you know, the general elections, you'd really see it come through when it comes to election results. So in reportage, I think we're going to see now discussions rotating so much around this. And it's going to be a subject of discussion as to who should be the flag bearer for which parties. Now that we're turning towards the final bend to 2021. You will see now one side in the movement that thinks that the process should be opened up to come up with a candidate to say, now look at how our candidate is faring as a party. At his lowest, no, I think we should open up the process again, especially these ones that have run to court. They really capitalize on this to say, we need a competitive process to give us a candidate. And here now the battle is really going to be so much into the papers as to who will carry the flag.
Which opinion poll?
For the opposition. Is it this one with 22? Is it this one with 13? Because you really see all these ones vying for the presidency in time very soon.
Dr. Marista, someone sent me a WhatsApp earlier today, and for our viewers, please don't send messages to my phone. I won't be able to pick them this evening. But someone sent me a message and said, you know, these numbers, the system is propping up one of the candidates for one simple reason, to cause confusion within the opposition. And Robert talks about something interesting. We have seen this before in this country, that one opinion poll gives these numbers and it's made big news. Then another opinion poll gives different numbers and same as the media. So some media house is reporting these other numbers, another media house is reporting the other numbers. When we get into that situation, what do what the lawyers would call the ordinary man on the street make of these opinion polls? Because one might say something different, and I mean says one thing and another says something completely different.
Yeah, I think with opinion polls are a different kind of research. and it has a different character in many ways. And I think that the reason you can talk about the US opinion poll being flat wrong is that elections are also a different kind of activity. This is 2 years away from 2021, from our election. You will be amazed how many things might change in between. And so the consistency of opinion polls can be, and I can tell you this, that some of these disparities come about as such that he may have had a randomized selection procedure, and even if I do have one and take exactly 2,000 people, the districts I'm going to select randomly are not going to be the districts that he's going to that he has selected. And so it is possible that the two of us are going to do research and we will be proportional and we will not find exactly the same thing because of the random
is the
nature.
variance
It will be within the margin.
the variance between different opinion polls. We don't have another opinion poll that says something different at the moment. Research World International could do another opinion poll that gives us completely different results. Should the variance be so wide? Because that's a critical question.
That would be unlikely for, I mean, the variance, if you can't compare different time periods, for example.
Exactly.
If you're looking at April, like I said, there could be different factors influencing the outcome in April. And maybe something happens in June that actually influences the results to a completely different direction. Maybe Besige does something that really people are happy with and it bounces him back and something. So you cannot compare two different periods. The variance, the kind of variance I'm talking about is if we both did the research in the same month and probably targeted the same number of people. And if we went to the same districts, we should be able to find exactly the same within a minor margin of variance. But your issue is what happens if that actually happens. The issue is it will cause confusion because people will then begin to ask questions around who has funded the survey, what methodology have they used, and these are real things in research because a lot of research, even scientific ones, are driven by the kind of questions asked. So if we and let's also face it, some of us researchers also, our biases might be, however professional we want to be, where we are coming from could influence our questions. And so the kind of questions you're asking, the people you're asking from, who is responding, all of those are important factors to analyze. If we ever got into that scenario, it would be important to see, okay, where are they coming from? What kind of questions did they ask? And who responded to them? And this should be easy to iron out. I do not want to, because I have not really read the method, I do not want to cast any doubt. I would want to trust that the research was done professionally and that the questions were also asked in a manner that generated, and I can understand if you're saying that there were follow-up questions, because you see, social research also allows you to catch the people who are lying. Someone might give you a response to question A that is going to be contradicted by question D, and you know that somebody is not being truthful there. And those can be weeded out usually in
Dr.
in social research process.
Dr. Kida, from your recent experiences, because I know you've been doing opinion polls, especially broader than the political questions. You've been conducting these opinion polls, but I'll restrict myself to the political ones. From your experience, how do they speak to the actual election results?
I think all the polls I've conducted have been close to the results that were declared by the Electoral Commission. And I've heard some people say, I think Wakida has been bought by the NRM.
And I've heard the NRM
say Wakida
is an FDC.
What a position to be.
And now the FDC will say Wakida belongs to the other group of the FDC, which has now formed a new political party.
Actually, yes. Unfortunately, the candidate everybody would want me to associate with didn't perform well in this particular poll. I think for me, the critical thing is people go for the numbers and they don't study the underlying factors. I spent a lot of time trying to understand this particular poll. You have an estimated 4 million voters, new voters, people who have never voted.
Yeah.
You try to understand those people. If elections were held today, who would they vote for? And you have close to 90% of those people behaving in the same, in one manner, following one candidate. You look at the demographic spread and you say, what is the young person between this age group likely to be voting if elections were held? And still you see a pattern of behavior of those people. That's why I said this particular survey was so unique. It's so unique that we asked questions. For example, we have just had an amendment of the Constitution. Your member of parliament represented you. Do you think the amendment was the correct thing to do? Or it was wrong? Or you don't know? And you have close to 70% of the population saying that was bad to do. Sometimes we underestimate how much people in the village know, unfortunately. People in the village have got knowledge of politics of this country to the extent that they know more than a number of people in urban areas. While you're hustling around, the villager is listening to radio. Even when they are digging, the radio is hanged on a tree.
In a tree branch.
Yes. So they have a lot of information.
When you're stuck in jam, they're watching TV.
Yes. Now, for me, who has studied politics, I started doing politics in London. I came to Nairobi with TNS, doing politics, studying politics. I came here 2007. I have studied much of all the politics of this country, and I have all the data from when we started doing polls up to today. I can therefore cross-reference and look back and say, how did these ones behave at this particular time? How are they behaving today? And you see completely different behavior. For the first time, you see a central region glued on one person almost. You see urban glued, you know, and you're asking, what is it? What's the motivation? When you go back and say, let me study these people, the majority of people in this area are actually young people who have left their villages to come here to look for survival. People who vote in Kampala.
So let me ask that critical question.
Yes.
Because opposition support, there's a person that sent me that message Ali talked about. Opposition support tends to be in urban areas. What was your split between the urbanized population and the rural population?
You see,
what's the percentage?
When you're doing opinion poll, there's what we call the proportionate distribution of population. Proportion to the population. That the population distributed should be equal to the weight of the population across. For example, if the percentage of the population of Uganda, say central or eastern, has got say 25, in the sample, that should be the case. Now, remember, this is a political opinion poll. Our basis is not the general population. Our basis is population 18 years and above. So our weights will go with that population. We will not include the younger people 15 or 14 years. We will focus on how many Ugandans, for example, are 18 years and above. So the distribution of that of that population must be proportionate.
Oh, yes. What's that proportionate?
Proportionate means that
No. I understand proportionate.
Yes.
Proportionate representation to the population. I'm asking
What was
the
it?
split. Yeah, what was it?
the split of that population.
Yes.
You
Between
have
urban and
urban. I think because we used UBOS, so you will find more women than men.
yes.
You will have
That's
about, I think
demographic.
about 31% were urban
Mhm.
and the majority were rural.
69% rural.
Yes, classification.
Okay. And you said the between men and women?
It was 49-51.
49-51.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Manis.
Yeah, those are all interesting things.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, I would want to read this report, these poll findings, to really be able to intelligently talk about the implications, because an opinion poll like this has a lot of implications, and that's why sometimes media houses are accused of pushing for a certain agenda and so on, because it's also knowing the assumptions that were held and everything. So I'm really interested. I will be looking forward to this poll finding. And you know, I would want to also ask, how often are you going to keep doing this? Are we going to see frequent opinion polls and subsequent
For the
ones?
first time, we set a target, and we said, whatever happens, we must be able to do at least a poll a year. But our target is two polls a year. You know, research is quite an expensive exercise, and I can tell you this poll was not funded by anybody. This is our own savings on the different programs we do. And we said, what else can we do as a research agency? Let us do this. We can't go on the road and start coloring the road at zebra crossing. We can't do that. But being a research agency, that is a social research agency, we said we will save a minimum of 5% on every project we do. And once we have enough money, then we can do.
So if you have exhausted your savings, are you going to do another opinion poll?
we are definitely going to do. We are definitely going to be doing another survey.
They'll make other savings from other
Because
programs.
I think that would be very
follow-up.
important to have follow-up polls, because interpretation of a poll like this could also have implications for decisions, political decisions. And it might also mean that some people will face more persecution from now on.
I've actually encouraged people, individual political actors, to do their
own
individual
opinion,
research.
internal opinion
It is
polls.
it's very healthy.
Yeah.
We do research for banks, but we get commissioned by individual banks. We do research for media, for example, the audience survey, which is being done by Ipsos. But you'll get any TV calling and say, come and do
Tell us how we're
specific
doing.
research. So I've encouraged political parties, political players, do research. Research, numbers never lie. I can tell you. You cannot count these to be 3. They are 4. Even when you try to hide this one, it will come up because they are 4.
Okay, our time is up. We need to get out of here. We'll be looking forward to seeing the opinion
In
reading.
the next many minutes.
In the next many minutes. Dr. Okeda won't be keeping his secret for too long.
No, it will be out tomorrow.
We'll still be able to know.
Yes.
We as we bring this to an end, your last word, Dr. Maristo?
Yes, I think I'll go. First of all, like, this poll is very necessary, and I hope that more of them can be done, and not just once a year or twice a year, and also maybe throughout the election period, so that we know how things are changing. I talked to somebody yesterday who was telling me that, we've had the same government for 35 years, and with the assumption that nothing has changed. And nothing could be so further from the truth. A lot has changed within the last 30 many years, because it's the same people, yes, but circumstances keep changing, and that means that also how we are responding to issues also keep changing. So the next 1 year could be very different from what we are seeing now. But as we link it to the media, the role of media in elections and so on, I think we have to be vigilant and to not cede any more space in as far as media freedom is concerned, to allow the media to play its democratic role, to ensure that the media can actually be an asset to democratic development in this country. And if the regulators are smart, they can actually turn the media into their ally and make sure that the media plays a more positive role in both development and democracy.
Okay. Dr. Okide?
I think for me, you guys in the media play a very important role, especially in educating and providing information. And that space must be left to you to do. But like I said here, responsible reporting should be one of your canon objectives, that people should be able to report responsibly. That one notwithstanding. I hope Mr. Mtavazi, as he sits there, he should be able to reflect on the best way to resolve this this conflict between him and the media houses. As of tomorrow, I would encourage those who want to know how research is done, especially the polling. I would encourage those who want to know many questions to come to Africana. If you have not been able to do so, we are going by 11 o'clock, we shall have posted the full report. If you want detailed analysis by gender you can get, by age you can get, by region you can get, but there are certain cross tabulation by religion. For example, we ask the question, what religion are you? We can still attach you to that religion. What tribe are you? We can still attach you to that demographic figures. Now, if you want that detailed report, please get in touch with us. Okay. We'll discuss that. But tomorrow, yes, come and get answers to many of the questions that you are asking yourself along the road.
Since you didn't answer my questions, I think I should ask NTV to send you an invoice.
Please come tomorrow.
Your last one. Your last one, Robert.
I think we should allow for robust discussions around the political terrain of this country. The ownership of media should be at the center stage of advocating for media freedom. They are extremely silent about what now catalyzes the media. All these attacks, either because most of them are politicians or business people that are aligned to political parties, they even fear to speak out against UCC or even its leadership, because they know that most of these directives have political connotations. But we should really set all these things aside and now work towards a professional media, a responsible media that will propel our country now as a whole to greater heights, lest we are all sinking in the same boat.
Thank you very much, Robert. And I've read that statement by the National Association of Broadcasters and a request for engagement with the Uganda Communications Commission. My own feeling was it should have been written in more sterner language than it was written. Yes. I think we used to have something called the Editors Guild. It's been long dead.
You never?
Yes.
Also?
I'm wondering where it is. And
but just very little about what UCC is now telling us to go to court. They think we already have money waiting to challenge them in court. They're using UCC money. Media houses are going to use their small savings to go to court. Why do you make orders which you know are challengeable and that people must run to?
But I've also been told, I think as of this evening, that the UCC was also quietly engaging to now have a discussion, because you can't have a UCC be complainant, be prosecutor, and be the judge. I think they're realizing that late and trying now to the principles of fairness.
Yes, and where is the tribunal in UCC?
Yes, and
supposed to handle.
There's supposed to be a tribunal which is not present. The Uganda Media Council, I think, is on sabbatical somewhere. Hasn't been present for some time. Though there are challenges about that as well. You also talked about NIJU. I think people have raised issues about who regulates NIJU and whether that should be the way the media gets regulated. But this is a space that won't be. It doesn't matter how much the authorities try to control this space. It is very difficult to control it. They just need to come up and. So to all the journalists who have suffered over the last year at the hands of authorities, at the hands of the police, at the hands of the military, and at the hands of regulation, because some people get squeezed and fired quietly. We never get to know about them. As colleagues operating in different areas, a phone call to the proprietor, to the manager, gets people fired from their jobs. And recently we saw what I think is a travesty of what we haven't seen before. Police breaking into studios to remove someone they don't want to hear, even when they are not able to deploy those forces to do some other things, which I think is horrible, and whoever has been defending those things. And last but not least, I'll take the opportunity of holding the microphone here to congratulate my king, the King of Toro, received the Vocation Award from the Rotary Club of Muyenga yesterday for his work towards health and wellness of his people in Uganda and beyond.
Congratulations.
As a UN Goodwill Ambassador.
Yeah. Wow.
And also,
That's a good thing.
I think launched something which I think is very important that Ugandans can pick up elsewhere. Launched a campaign to plant 10 million trees
Wow.
over the next 5 years, which is an average 2 million trees per year, which I think it's something important in this era of climate change and global warming that we need to engage
Some
with.
should be in Buganda.
Yeah?
Some trees should be planted here.
Planted in Buganda, you say now, this guys. Our time is out. Thank you very much, Robert, for making time for the show. Robert is Executive Director, the Human Rights Network for Journalists, HRNJ. Dr. Patrick Wakida is Executive CEO at Research World International, and Dr. Emily Comfort Maratho teaches journalism at Uganda Christian University. For me, it's a good night.
Thank you.